My father grew up in a fishing village. My grandfather worked for a fishing firm that sent trawlers out to sea to fish. And I guess my father grew up with a romantic view of what it would be like to be out at sea with one of these trawlers. So my grandfather arranged for my dad as a boy to go along on one of these trips. The boat would be out for a week or more at sea. I remember my dad talking about the experience later and saying how he had spent the first 2 days of that trip crawled up on his bed down in the hold, afraid every moment that he would die. And then that feeling passed, and for the rest of the trip, he spent his time crawled up on his bed, afraid that he wouldn't die. In the last week or so, I've been listening particularly to the feelings and the variety of feelings surrounding anxiety and fear as people have encountered this lockdown situation. Initially, there was the fear that I might contract the disease or that somebody I love could get sick. But that has grown to and broadened to have more anxieties now too. The anxiety of breaking the rules. Am I doing things right? What if I am doing the wrong thing? And are others obeying the rules as they should? There have been growing anxieties about fears about jobs, security, and finances. And then, of course, there have been the guilt feelings as we've set ourselves goals at the start of lockdown. Oh, during this lockdown, I'm going to learn to speak Spanish or clear out the garage or do something else. And a lot of these things have been left undone as we've lacked the motivation and enthusiasm to do them and haven't been able to keep the habits that we'd set for ourselves. And then increasingly, as we come towards the end of the lockdown, there are the fears of what life will be like afterwards. Will things go back to normal? And it seems as though it will be a long, long time before they do. What sort of a life will we have as we start to come out of this lockdown? This week is also Christian Aid Week, and as I've read all the information about Christian Aid this year, I've been reminded of the parts of the world where a return to normal will mean a return to other anxieties and fears, famine and war and hunger and water shortages and violence. At first, when we look at our psalm for this week, Psalm 31 sounds like a wonderful antidote to all of this fear and anxiety. There are all sorts of ways in which this passage of Scripture talks about God saving us, God rescuing us. Hebrew poetry often uses a kind of a doublet, the idea that we say something and then we say it again in a slightly different way to emphasize. So we have this doubling of the expression. But in this short passage of just 5 verses, we have not 2, but 5 different accounts of the way in which God saves us. The Hebrew actually uses 5 different words to describe God saving us. It is God who enables us to escape by slipping out. Then God snatches us away from danger. God sets us free to be in a safe place. Then God brings us out of a net, just as the Hebrew people were brought out of slavery in Egypt. And finally, God pays the ransom for us to be freed from our captors. It sounds like it's a happy-go-lucky time for us all, but don't be misled. Psalm 31 is a psalm of lament. It is a psalm written in extreme anxiety and fear, and God saves the people in that situation. The reason God needs to save us in so many different ways is because there is danger on every side. In the verses we didn't read, the other parts of the passage, we hear about some of the distress that the psalmist is in. I'm in distress. My eye is wasted from grief. My soul and my body also. My life is spent in sorrow, my years with sighing. Because of my adversaries, I have become a reproach, an object of dread. Those who see me in the street flee from me. I have been forgotten like one who is dead. I hear whispering of many, terror on every side. They scheme together against me as they plot to take my life. No wonder then that Jesus on the cross and Stephen, the first Christian martyr at his stoning, both quoted from this psalm. This is no happy-go-lucky song. This is a psalm of lament written from a deep place of anxiety and fear. And in this situation, the psalmist says that it is God who is our rock and our fortress. He is the one who is able to save us in so many different ways, in every way, in fact. But, and this is the first important part, what is it that he bases this trust on? How can the psalmist be so sure that God will be able to save him? The answer lies in another Hebrew word, chesed, the steadfast love of God. Make your face shine on your servants. Save me in your steadfast love. And we need a bit of interpretation here, because the love here is not referring to romantic feelings. The steadfast love is something different. It's something stronger. It is love that is strong and is able to hold us with a powerful hand. Love that will not let us go. In this psalm, we have the meeting of anxiety and trust. Our anxiety in our situation is met head-on by our trust in God's steadfast love, which will not let us go. But, and this is the second important part, notice where the salvation lies. Our salvation lies in the strength of God's steadfast love, not in the strength of our trust, which is fickle and can change from day to day. This psalm is not saying we should not be anxious. Far from it. Again and again, the psalmist talks about his own feelings of shame and fear and desperation. To feel these things, these emotions, when we are surrounded by danger on every side is absolutely normal. Our feelings of anxiety and fear in this situation are absolutely normal. Or do you imagine that Jesus faced his death on the cross with a kind of sublime serenity? Or that Stephen stared down his executioners without an ounce of fear? No. Just as faith only exists in the presence of doubt, so trust only exists in the presence of fear. We do not trust because we have no fear. We trust because we are fearful, and we realize that the only power that can save us is beyond our own power. And the name of that power is steadfast love. And it is the God of steadfast love to whom we surrender when we say to him, "Into your hand I commit my spirit."